Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma daf mem. Today's daf is sponsored by Judy Shapiro and Shiur Krebs in memory of Ari Yechiel Zenelman, Ari Yechiel ben Avram Reuven Miriam Hashem Yikom Damo, who fell in battle yesterday. And his family, no more sorrow. Difficult while we've been dealing with a lot of deaths. Okay. On a different note, we started our annual Circle of Friends campaign. Specifically in these difficult times, your support is more important than ever to allow us to continue our programming. And for those who listen every day, basically the Circle of Friends, $360, $1 a day, or 1,200 shekels, 100 shekels a month. So we really, really need your support for 2024 to be able to continue doing all the things that we're doing. So thank you in advance for being part of it. And you can find details on the website. We're going to get started with a quick review of yesterday's daf. For this, I did a chart on the study guide. You can see it. I'm going to pull it up right now, which is, we started with this Rabbi Yaakov's opinion about a shor of a cheresh shotev katan shenagach. Rabbi Yaakov says you pay half damages. And then we said, what are we talking about? If it's a tam, it's obvious you pay half damages. Why do you even need to tell us? If it's a muad, well, if you did shmirah, then if you watched it, then you don't have to pay at all. And if you didn't watch it, then remember, if you did a good shmirah and the animal somehow got out, well, then you wouldn't have to pay. If you didn't do any kind of watching of the animal, then you'd have to pay full damages. So what's going on here? To that, we had two answers. We have Rava, who said both of them actually end up saying it's a shor muad. It is a forewarned animal. It's just, Rava says, you did minor watching. You didn't do a high level watching. And then we have to get very complicated here, which is why the Gemara is going to say, why did he have to get so complicated? And say that Rabbi Yaakov holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Number one, sad tamuk and koma omed, that the part of the shor tam stays in its place, which means when you pay for a shor muad full damages, it's made up of half the shor, the half nezek of the shor tam plus the shor muad. And what we're going to basically say is the shor muad part, he actually doesn't have to pay because he did enough shmirah for the shor muad. But a shor tam, according to Rabbi Yehuda, right, somewhat anti, what can't be the word, but the opposite of what you would have counterintuitive, that dafka for a muad, you have to watch less. And therefore, the watching you did was enough for the muad part. It wasn't enough for the tam part, because the tam, since nobody knows the animal gores, you actually have to protect more, because who knows if it will go out and damage. That's a unique opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And you'd have to say, so number one, the tzad of the tam is still there. The muad you took care of because you did a proper watching for it, but there wasn't enough of a proper watching for the tam. That's all Rabbi Yehuda. And you would have to say that Rabbi Yaakov holds like the rabbis, that the apitropos that you put up isn't only there to make the shor muad, as we saw in the previous stuff, but also you can collect payment from the apitropos for a shor tam payment for the chatzinez. That's all Rava. Abaye says, no. I agree with you partially, but not fully. It was a shor muad, but it wasn't watched at all. And it was actually the muad part that you're obligated for, not the tam part. Yes, we hold like Rabbi Yehuda that you're only chayav in part. Because remember, we said if it's a muad, why are you paying half damages? Well, you're paying half damages because according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's two parts to the muad. There's the tam and there's the muad. The tam part is not relevant here. Why is it not relevant? Because right? And in that case, he doesn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda on that issue, but he does agree with Rabbi Yehuda about the tam part. The tam part is still there even in a muad payment. And therefore, you're going to have to pay the muad part of the muad. So we basically have, Rava says it's muad, but you pay the short tam part of it. And Abaye says it's muad and you pay the muad part and not the tam part. And that's how each one gets to half damages. And then we'd had this whole question on Rava. Doesn't Rabbi Yaakov disagree with Rabbi Yehuda? Because it says in a braita that Rabbi Yehuda is mechayev and Rabbi Yaakov says, no, chatzinezek. To which we had a possible answer that really Rabbi Yaakov is explaining Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? So now the Gemara is going to ask this question, 3 lines from the bottom of Lamed Tet Amud Bet. Amarle Rav Acha bar Abaye le Ravina. Bishlam al Abaye tamar pligi shapir. Okay. If Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda actually disagree, then Abaye makes a lot of sense as to how we got to this opinion here. But about explaining this Rabbi Yaakov's opinion. Ela Rava amar lo pligi. But according to Rava, who says that Rabbi Yaakov was just trying to explain Rabbi Yehuda, and they agree across the board, then why did he have to get so complicated? He could have just said it much simply that it was talking about a short time. And instead of having to say, the tzad tamut and the shmira pchuta and the mamidim apitropos l'tam, he could have just said, because in theory, what he's really trying to say is that it sounds like the main goal of Rava was to disagree with Abaye about this mamidim apitropos l'tam l'gvot migufo. In which case, say it was a short time, the half damages you're paying is because if you remember, we said if it's batam, it's obvious you pay half damages. To which he wants to say, no, it's not obvious because it's a cheresh shotevet katan. Maybe you wouldn't have to pay. And why don't we just say, yes, we're talking about a short time, and the whole halacha is mamidim apitropos l'tam l'gvot migufo. And that would have been a much simpler way to go. So let's read it inside. There's two options to go with a short time. Either you say, Rabbi Yaakov is holding like Rabbi Yehuda, that it was a short time, but what happened? You only did a minor amount of shmirah, which is not enough, if you remember, according to Rabbi Yehuda, for a short time. And then again, you would have to pay because apitropos is responsible for paying short time damages for a minor. Or if you follow Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion, which we'll see in a second, you could say that Rabbi Yaakov was talking about a case where there was no shmirah done at all. What does Rabbi Yaakov, Eliezer ben Yaakov, say? He disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda about what kind of shmirah each animal needs. And he says very simply, Detanya, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, even a minor type of shmirah. You put up a fence that theoretically could have been knocked over, but you did put up that fence and you tried to protect the animal somewhat. That's enough to release you from responsibility for a short time and a shor muad. So you could say, again, either the braita when Rabbi Yaakov is chayav chatzi nezek was where they did a shmirah pchuta and he held like Rabbi Yehuda, that it wasn't enough though for a short time, or he didn't do any shmirah, and it was according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says, as long as you do a little bit of shmirah, you're not obligated, but here you are obligated because you didn't do any shmirah. Okay, so you could have said that. And then, as I said before, here we're going to see it inside. Rabbi Yaakov, what his real chidush he was trying to teach us is mamidim laham apitropos l'tam l'gvot migufo. That when the apitropos comes in to be in charge of the minor's possessions and animals, right? When you say, listen, apitropos, this animal started goring, you better start protecting the animal so that the animal doesn't go out and wreak havoc in our community. Well, it's not just to prevent the animal from becoming a muad, it's also to immediately make the kid responsible for damages. So if the ox goes and gores after the apitropos became in charge, then yes, short time is going to have to pay half damages. And that could be very simply what Rabbi Yaakov is teaching us. So why did Rava go and say it was this complicated case where it was a muad, and the muad is made up of tam and muad, and it's the tam payment we're talking about, not the muad, because he did a minor shmirah, not a major shmirah, and blah, blah, blah. Why do you have to get so complicated? So which he answers, Amalei, Hachi Kamar. This is what he meant to say. It's one case that has two reasons to it. In other words, we wanted to show that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda on two things. Now, it's a little bit tricky because it's really three, but they seem to combine one and two. Okay, let's look back. What does Rava hold? That Rabbi Yaakov holds like Rabbi Yehuda about sad tamut ukoma omedet, and muad, it's enough for muad to have minor watching. That they kind of count as one. If you take chaddi katarte literally as one, which is really two. In other words, in one halacha, he's able to teach you two things, which really could just be two, could just be a number, and it really means a number of things. In which case, again, or you just combine one and two to say that's one, and then two is the third. But in the end, there's really three things going on here, however you look at the number two here. Again, muad is made up of half tam payment and half muad payment. That's the first thing he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Muad, it's enough to do a minor watching, and therefore, in this case, he won't be responsible for the muad part, only the tam. And mamidim apitropos the tam l'gvot migufo, and that when you set up an apitropos, the apitropos is already going to be liable for tam damages. Again, only damages that happen once the apitropos was in charge. But basically, you're going to end up with. That's why Rava said this complicated case, because he wanted to teach us multiple things. He didn't want to teach us just one thing. He wanted us to know that Rabbi Yaakov held like Rabbi Yehuda on everything. Tanu Rabbanan. Now, if we're already talking about apitropsim, we're going to talk about apitropsim regarding another issue. Number one, this braita says apitropsim mishalmim mina aliyah. So that means if it's a shor muad, that we know already. right? The apotropos is going to have to pay from the children's property. Again, we had a debate. From the children's property, from the apotropos' property, right? And the children only pay back the apotropos when they get older. There were two possibilities, but yes, once you have an apotropos, you pay already full damages if it's a shor muad. Ve'ein meshamim kofer. But if the animal kills a person, you don't pay that ransom payment. Remember, okay, we can bring it up. It's on the bottom of the first side of the study guide. It says in the pasuk, okay, at the bottom, in Shmo Kaf Aleph, skip the first pasuk, and the second pasuk, in shor nagachu mitmol shel it's a shor muad, and you didn't watch. Vehemi isha isha, sakol yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumat. Right, this is actually even muad, even tam. The shor gets stoned, but in the shor muad, there's an additional thing, which is the owner really should die, but we don't kill the owner because the owner didn't kill with their own hands. But what do we do? Im kofer yushat alav and atam pidyon nafsho kachol yushat alav. So what do we say? If they put a ransom payment on him, or really they do put a ransom payment on the person, and the person pays their way out. Now, the orphan or the cheresh or shotet doesn't pay that. Okay, the apotropos is not responsible to pay that payment for them. Why is that? Because that is for atonement purposes. Now, the child or the cheresh or the shotet doesn't need atonement because they're not considered a person who ever did anything with intent, because they don't have halachic da'at, knowledge, capabilities, and therefore the assumption is they shouldn't need atonement, right? There's two different things going on here. Muad payment is to pay the family for the damages caused. That's in a damage case. In a case of death, there is no damage payment. There's ransom payment, but ransom payment is for atonement. Although the Gemara is going to say, not true that everyone agrees, or maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Let's see. Mantana kufra kapara v'yat melab b'nei kapara. Who's the one who holds? Okay, we're now going to think that this is a machloket. Is the ransom payment atonement, as I just explained? Or is it possible the ransom payment is to compensate the family for their loss? Like we have lawsuits all the time nowadays that someone kills someone and there's financial damages. The family, the person who killed has to pay the family. So is this ransom payment a restitution for the family, or is it atonement for the person? And is this, who's the Tana who says this? Meaning there's an assumption that this is a machloka between Tanaim. So Amar Rav Chisda, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, and now he's going to say, yeah, this is a machloka between Tanaim. Here's the machloket, and the one who says it's atonement is Rabbi Shmuel, son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Ditanya, as it says in a braita, very famous machloket. We actually saw this before. V'natan pidyon nafsho. It says in the pasuk there, you redeem your soul. How do you redeem your soul? Well, there's a machloket. What do you pay? Right? Assuming, a person kills someone, or a person's animal kills someone, there's an assumption that likely, or it could be, the value of the person who killed is not the same as the value of the person who was killed. And then the question is, how do we assess based on, now, what's the value of a person in general? That's always a hard question. But in those days, it was kind of fairly simple. They would go to the market of what slaves went for in the shuk, and that would be the way they would value a person. Okay, if you're very strong, if you're old, if you're there's all different things about what are your work capabilities. So how do we assess this ransom payment? Not all people are valued the same. So we have a machloket. Kamma says it's based on the damage you caused. Now that would sound like, if it's based on the person who was killed, then that would sound like it's compensation for the family. Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka demei mazik. What do you mean? It's the person who damaged, okay, which means it's atonement because you're giving you're ransoming your soul. My la baka miflage. Is this not the root of the machloket? Says Rav Chisda. The Rabbanan safrei kufra mamonahu. Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka safrei kufra kapara. Right, the one who says it's mamon payment, they say, oh, that's why you value it based on the person that you killed. If you say it's kapara atonement, then you value it based on the person whose animal killed. But Amar Rav Papa though, Rav Papa says, what are you talking about? That's not the machloket between them. Tikula ama kufra kaparahu. Okay, and even think of the words kufra kapara have the same root. Of course, the kofar, the ransom payment, is a payment for atonement. That's the purpose. It says, "V'natan pidyon nafsho," you have to redeem your soul from dying. That means yourself. Okay, it's all about you. But it's not about restitution to the family. But why is there a machloket? What value then? Well, so there's a debate. How do you redeem your soul when your animal killed another person? Do you redeem it based on the action that was done and the person that was killed? Or do you redeem yourself based on your own value? So that's the machloket. Rabbanan savre b'dinizak shaymina. On what basis do we evaluate this? The Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka savar b'dim mazik shayminan. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's evaluated based on the mazik. So, my time of the Rabbanan, now we want to see why does each person hold this way? Where did they get to their opinions from? But in the end, we're basically saying, Rav Papa thinks this is not the machloket tanaim about. Is it kapara? Is it atonement, or is it financial restitution? So why would you say then, how would you get to each opinion? So the rabbis who said it's based, yes, it's for me to ransom myself, okay, I let's say my animal killed someone, I have to pay out my own way, but how do I pay it? Based on the damage I caused. Now, how would you get to this? Let's look at the study guide and the psukim. We're now going to compare two psukim. Gezerah Shabbat, the same word is going to appear, or the same root is going to appear in two different psukim, and we're going to say what's true for one is true for the other. Ne'emra shita lemata v'ne'emra shita lemala. Okay, the root shintaf, okay, is going to appear in one place, and it's going to appear in our place. Just like here, like in the other place, it was talking about the damage caused. Also here, it's going to be assessed by the damage caused. What's the pasuk? Shmot 21. It's the same chapter we've been discussing, but verse 22. Two people are fighting, and then this pregnant woman walks by, gets involved somehow in the middle of their fight. And she loses she miscarries. Velo yason, and she doesn't get killed, but she loses the child, the fetus. Anosh yanesh, so the person who caused it will be punished. Kashil yashit ala bal haisha, at the amount that the husband of the woman puts upon him. Okay, and then he has to pay. So what does it mean, kasher yashit alav? What value are they going to pay? Obviously, the value of the fetus, because the husband of the wife is going to demand payment for what the fetus was worth. So now that's basically saying the nizak. So since it says kasher yashit alav, and in our pasuk it says im kofer yushat alav, where it's the same root, we're going to say what's true for one is true for the other. Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yaakov ben Broka safar. What are you talking about? But natam pidyon nafsho ktiv. It says you redeem your soul. How else are you going to redeem your soul if not by the value of your own soul? So that sounds pretty clear. How did the rabbis disagree with this? Well, Rabbanan, im pidyon nafsho ktiv. Yes, it's true. It says you redeem your soul, but it's just a matter of how do you redeem your soul? And again, it's not all about your soul and what your soul is worth. It's about the action that you caused to somebody else. So yes, you're redeeming your own soul, but the value is based on the value of the death that was caused. So again, you could see how this debate could keep going, but we're going to end it here. Now that we've been talking about this kofar payment, because again, what did we do so far today? First, we finished up the Rava and Abaye machloket about Rabbi Yaakov, and what does he really hold, and which case is it in? And we said, why did Rava get so convoluted and say that it was about the shor muad? You could have just said simply short time, and we ended up saying, well, he wanted to teach us that Rabbi Yaakov holds like Rabbi Yehuda on a bunch of different issues and not just one, and therefore it's much, he wanted to take a more complicated case to explain that. Then we moved to the apitropus, who pays, yes, full damages if it's a shor muad, but doesn't pay kofar damages. Right? Remember, in a shor muad case, that was if a shor muad damages. If a shor muad kills, there's no financial payment that the apitropus has to pay. Why is that? Because kufra is kapara, it's atonement, and there is no atonement for people who don't need atonement, basically. Okay, that's how we got here, and now we're going to talk about other things about the nature of atonement. Right? What we tried to say is perhaps Rav Chisda thought it was a machloket tanaim, whether kofar is kapara or mamon is a payment, and Rav Papa disagreed and said it's not. Everyone thinks it's atonement. It's just a matter of how you assess the atonement. If you say it's a machloket, then you'd have to say that this braita that holds that you don't pay the kofar for the cheresh shoten katan is only according to one opinion, right? That would be what you would say. It follows a particular opinion, but not everyone's opinion. But according to Rav Papa, it agrees with everyone's opinion that there's no reason for kapara for a child. Now we get a story, which is, and this is a common structure of a story, where somebody is praising somebody else. Okay, so what happened here? Rav Nachman bid Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov. So he goes to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Rava, and he's saying, oh, Rav Nachman, he's so smart. He's a real big Talmud Chacham, the Adam Gadolu. He's a very important, prominent person. Okay, now why Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says this, probably it has to do with ego. He starts to feel like, oh, who's this guy and he's better than me? Well, he says, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says to Rava, this smart guy, you think he's so smart. When he gets here, bring him to me. I'll test him. I'll see how great he is. So when he got in front of him, he said, I'm going to ask you something. So he asked him the following question. I'm going to see in the end, it's going to be 2 questions, but we're going to start with one. Both have to do with the nature of this kofar payment. Shor shel shnei shutafim ketzam mishalmim kofar. He gives them a bit of a complicated case. What if 2 people own a shor and the shor went and killed somebody? So, mishalem hai kofar v'hai kofar. Are you going to have each of them redeem their souls because each was responsible partially for causing the death? But there's no such thing as half, so each one pays whole. But how could you say that? Kofar echad amar rachman v'lo shnei kofrim. It says, there's one person who pays kofar, and you don't have 2 kofar payments for one death. This sounds similar to the story when multiple people killed a person, right? It's different. And if you want to say, hai chatzi kofar v'hai chatzi kofar, each one pays half. Kofar shalem amar rachman v'lo chatzi kofar. What does it mean to pay half your soul? Like, that's not a real ransom payment. You're not really paying your way out if you only pay half your value. So what's the story? Well, what does Rav Nachman say? Well, he doesn't say anything. So he starts looking it up and thinking about it. In the meanwhile, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov doesn't give him much time and throws another question at him. It says in the Mishnah, if I give the value of a person to the temple, I have to give the value of a person. Okay, this, by the way, is similar to what we're talking about in terms of valuations of people, but there the Torah gives a specific amount. Depending on what age you are, depending on whether you're male or female, you're worth X amount according to Torah law. That's what you have to bring to the Beit HaMikdash. And if you don't pay up after you committed to this, the temple, whoever works for the temple, could come to your house and demand a collateral in exchange for the fact that you haven't paid. They can insist. However, if I'm supposed to bring a sin offering or a guilt offering, they don't come. If I don't pay it up yet, they don't come and demand something as collateral. What's the reason? We're going to see this after, but the Gemara assumes that when I need atonement for something, then we assume I'm going to take care of it, because who wants to live with a sin on their hands? So basically, we assume if it's Hadran that I sinned and I didn't pay up, I'm definitely going to pay up. But if it's some promise I gave to the temple, right, we don't always remember to keep our promises. So where does kofar fall in this whole thing? Well, the obvious would be to say it's right. And again, this gets to the nature of the payment. It's for atonement purposes. So if I don't pay the kofar, then we don't come and demand something of me, because we assume you're going to take it quite seriously because it's to pay your way out of, otherwise you're going to have some sin weighing on you and you're going to want to get that off. And therefore they don't come and take collateral. But wait a minute. Where's the payment going? To your friend, to the person whose family, the family of the person who was killed. Therefore, you might view it as mamonahu v'lo legavoahu, since it's going to be viewed by you like a payment and not like a payment to the temple, like a sacrifice. Maybe you're not going to take it as seriously as a chatat and asham, because it's not going to God, going to someone else, just to deal with it another time, and ignore it. So, which is it? Which again would mean then we can actually go and take it from you, because it's unlikely you're going to do it on your own. Again, this is a case where you delayed taking care of it. Or a third option, even though usually, right, it would seem like there's 2 possibilities. Well, inami kevandu hulo chata umamonehid azik. Another way of looking at it is, I didn't actually sin in this case. If I have to bring a chatat or an asham, I did a sin and I need atonement. In this case, why do I need atonement? Because I wasn't careful enough about my ox, and my ox caused a death, but I didn't cause death directly. So I don't view this as such serious atonement. Yeah, whatever, but not as serious as if I did the sin myself. And therefore, maybe maybe I won't take it so seriously, and therefore I need a mashka. So this is a whole handful of information, and for Rav Nachman to try to figure out. So Rav Nachman says to him, leave me alone already. I'm still thinking about your first question. Why are you throwing a second question at me? So Rav Nachman obviously didn't exactly pass this test of Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov, because he didn't really know his answers. On the other hand, Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov was kind of really trying to stump him, obviously, on questions that perhaps there's no good answer to. Tanu Rabbanit. Now we're moving to a braita. Okay, we have a long daf, so I don't have time to linger on any one topic today. Now we're going to talk about someone who borrowed. We're going to have 2 scenarios. One is, I borrow your ox. If you remember, when I borrow your ox, I'm responsible for damages. But I borrow your ox, shalo b'chezkat tam. You told me the shor was a shor tam. V'nimtza muad. And then it turns out it was a muad shor. It wasn't a shor tam. And now the ox gored and they want me to pay full damages. But I say, I borrowed an ox. I thought it was a tam, not a muad. I shouldn't have to pay full damages. So what's the halacha? Ba'alim mishamim chatzi nezek v'shor mishalem chatzi nezek. I pay as much as I took responsibility for, half damages, and you pay the other half. You're the owner. You didn't tell me it was a muad, so you have to pick up the other half. What if I got it as a tam, it was a tam, and then muad bebeit shoel, but while it was with me, it became a shor muad. It gored a bunch of times, became a shor muad. After I'm finished borrowing it, I return it to you. Is it still a shor muad? No. If it damages when it's in your domain, I'm totally exempt because it's not mine anymore. I'm not using it anymore. And you only have to pay half damages because it goes back to being a short time. There's a bit of a problem with this because the first one assumed that when it went from you to me, it retained its status of a shor muad. But when it went from me to you, it went back to being a short time, right? When we talked about this reshut mishaneh, switching domains, does it change? Does it not change? This seems to say itself in the opposite. So we're going to have to deal with that much later. But before we get there, we have a bit of a long sugya that's a bit complicated, which is we're now going to have a slew of claims that I could try to make to get out of the half damages as the borrower. And the Gemara is going to say why I can't claim that, okay? Or maybe do a bit of an ukimta of this braita to say it must be in this case. Otherwise, I really would have a claim why I don't have to pay. Because remember, basically, if you want to make someone pay, the burden of proof is on you. So if I have some sort of claim where I can get out of it, then I theoretically shouldn't have to pay the half damages. So we're dealing with case number one. I assumed for whatever reason, it's not clear if you told me or it was just known that this was a short time and it turns out it was really a shor muad. And now the ox gored while I was borrowing it, I have to pay half the damage and you pay half the damage, which sounds very fair. But the Gemara is going to say, why should I even pay at all? And they're going to throw a slew of questions. Amar sha'alo b'chezkat tam v'nimtza muad b'shlamim chatzi nezek v'shoel chatzi nezek. Sorry, ba'alim mishamim chatzi nezek v'shoel chatzi nezek. That's the case. We each pay half. Amai le'male Torah she'ile aryeyo lo she'ile. If I got a shor that you said was a short time, and now it starts goring all over this place, I can say to you, what I borrowed an animal that I thought was a nice tame animal. Most shores don't gore, and you gave me a lion. Why should I pay anything of damages? You gave me something that was already known as a lion, a very violent animal. And you didn't tell me that. I thought I was getting a nice, calm, tame animal. So Amarav, again, what I told you is we're going to do an ukimta. This braita would seem to only be true then, according to this, if it was it would have to be a case where I didn't know it was a shor muad, but I did know that it had gored a few times. Now it would have to be gored twice, let's say, or that it did have a track record. If it didn't have any track record of goring, then I really could claim, I don't know you gave me something that almost, some people actually say it's a mekach ta'ut. You say my borrowing was all incorrect because that's not what I wanted to borrow. I wanted to borrow a nice tame animal and you gave me a crazy animal. So it would have to be a case where I knew that it had gored. I just didn't know it was a shor muad already, that, they had testified 3 times against it, blah, blah, blah. B'nei still, even if it had gored once or twice, or it was known to be a goring animal, still I could have said, say, look, still, I got it thinking it was a tam, so I shouldn't have to pay damages because it's a muad, to which that's not a great claim because mishum d'amar self itam ha'b'palganis kabay shlumet. Well, the owner could say, what, you're trying to get out of paying anything? If you thought you got a short time, you knew you were going to be liable for half damages, so that's all we're making you pay anyway. That's not a real claim. So hashtanami, therefore now also zil shleim palganizka. In other words, okay, you thought it was a tam, so what? You thought it was a tam, you thought you were only have to pay half. Well, it's a muad, but we're only making you pay half anyway, so that's not a good claim. But wait, I as the borrower say, listen, if it was a tam, you would have taken the animal. Now what happens? We all have to pay out of pocket, right? But they would have just taken the shor. So then I wouldn't have had to pay anything because they would just take the shor from me as payment. That wouldn't come out of my pocket. Mishum da'amar, no, you could say to me, if you were the one who lent it to me, alav Torah bayit shlumidideh. What do you mean? Remember, a borrower has to pay for anything. They're even liable for onus. That means if while I was borrowing your shor, it gored, and let's say it was a short time, not our case, they would have taken the animal in payment. Well, when you come back and say, where's my shor? And I say, well, the shor damaged and I had to pay payment. You would say, okay, well, pay me the value of the animal. So I would have to pay anyway. So I still would have to pay the half damages, up to the value of the animal. Remember, that's how we pay. So that doesn't help. But we are going to have a claim now that we're v'nei maleh, turning now to amabet. There's another difference between atonement and muad. Two differences we're going to talk about now. If you remember, there was a whole debate about half damages. Is it knas or is it mamon? Is it a penalty or is it compensation? If it's compensation, you have to pay no matter what. But if it's penalty, and I go to court and I admit, and I say in court, listen, before the witnesses come, I admit that my shor gored, then I don't have to pay. So now I have a claim on you. If I thought it was a shor tam and it turns out it was a shor muad, I could have, had it been a tam, I could have gone and admitted before any witnesses came. By the way, there's some opinions that say that wouldn't help me if witnesses actually eventually came. But this would have to be according to the one who says that if I admit before the witnesses come, I can actually exempt myself from payment. So I, as the borrower, say, listen, you told me it was a short time, which means I had a way out. I could have just gone to court and I wouldn't have had to pay anything. So now how can you make me pay the half damages? And even if you say, afilu lamanda amar palgan iska mamona, okay, we're now in amabet. Even if you say half damages is compensation, it's not a knas, in which case it won't help me. Like I wouldn't be able to make this claim. I do have another claim. Name alay. Now it's a little bit deceptive, this claim, but still it's one I could claim, even though it's a bit deceptive. I could say itam. Now remember, what's another difference between shor tam and shor muad? Shor tam, you pay with the animal. If there's no animal, you don't pay. Shor muad, you have to pay no matter what, whether there is an animal, whether the animal gets lost, it doesn't make a difference. So let's say the animal got lost, I wouldn't have to pay anything. So I say, itamhu hava ma'arikna leila agma. I would have sent the animal to run away to the marsh, and there in the marsh, it would be mixed up with all other animals. Nobody would know who the shor is. And then I would have gotten out of payment. Okay, so it's a little bit underhanded, but it is a claim I can make saying, now that it's a muad, I can't do that. It won't help me. So look, I shouldn't have to pay anything because I had a way out. And now, based on incorrect facts, right? Now it turns out it was really a muad and I have no way out. And therefore, you can't make me pay because based on what you told me originally, there was a short time, I wouldn't have had to pay anything. Or I could have created a scenario where I wouldn't have paid anything. So the Gemara is going to answer because obviously I do pay half damages. So why is that? Well, again, in ukimta. What must be the case? It would be a case where the court came and took this away, okay? The Beit Din came and took the animal. Now, if the Beit Din takes the animal, then I can no longer claim, I could have hidden it. So basically, we're saying if the Beit Din basically, why would the Beit Din take the animal? Because in payment. So what happened in this case must be that the Beit Din sees the animal for the payment, and therefore I have to pay half damages. I can't claim, I could have had the animal go run into hiding or, get mixed up with other animals and no one would ever know, and I wouldn't have to pay because it's already in the hands of the court. So basically, the way they answer the last question is they're going to have to assume that the animal is already in the hands of the court. Well, now we're going to have on this ukimta a bunch of questions on the other side, which is, until now we've been saying what claims I could have made as the borrower. If already the animal is seized, now you as the owner can come with a counterclaim because remember, I have to pay half and the owner has to pay half. Now, if the Beit Din seized the animal while I was taking care of it, right? I was borrowing it. Then basically the owner can claim it's my fault that the animal was seized by the court. Now, once the animal is seized by the court, which means they've already got the upper hand and we have the underhand. So comes the owner, and this is basically all questions on this ukimta. So we had 4 questions of, right, let me just count again. Yeah, 4. Well, 4, the fourth was like kind of split into 2. Either I could have admitted it or I could have had it run away. Those are 2 I count kind of as 1. 4 things I could have said. In the end, we kind of resolve all of them. And the last one we resolved by basically giving this ukimta. Well, if this is the ukimta, then the other side, we're now going to question this answer. Because you can have a counterclaim and say, why do I have to pay my half? You should pay the whole thing. because it's all your fault. So you say to me, as the borrower, Nemale, because you could say to me, they took the shore away from you. If it were me, I would have been able to avoid it somehow. But now that the shore was with you, they took the shore away, and now I have no one to even make a claim against. In other words, it's already too late for me, and it's all because they seized the shore from you, and it's all your fault. To which I say, what are you talking about? Mishum da'amrale, if I have returned it to you, they would have seized it from you. In other words, it's not because it was a maya that I let them seize it from me. What do you mean? The court came in and seized the shore because the shore gored. If I returned it to you before the court came, it wouldn't have made it any better for you. They would have just come to your house and taken the shore. Wait, but still you could say, if you have returned it to me before the court seized it, now you make that claim. I could have had it run away to the marsh. I could have, sent it there. They never would have been able to claim the animal. Now, remember, it's a shor muad. They don't need the animal for your half. My half was the shor tam part. There I had a claim. I sent it to the marsh. But you, what does that help you? You have to pay min aliyah. You have to pay the value. It doesn't matter whether the shore is in existence or not. Your part is for the muad part. You knew the shore was muad. I didn't know it was muad, but you did. Mishum da amrale, sof lab me aliyah have a mishtame. Because I could say to you, what's the difference? If you had had the shore run away to marsh, it wouldn't have helped. Because in the end, you'd have to pay out of pocket. Well, depends. That's only if you have money, other money to pay from. But remember, what if you have no other money, just this shore? Then you could say, I would have had it run away, and then they wouldn't be able to claim because I have nothing for them to collect from. Well, no, still we have an answer to that. Your whole claim was that I should have returned it to you. And had I returned it to you, you could have avoided the situation. To which I say, I actually didn't ever have to return it to you. Why? Because based on the shibud of Rabbi Nachman, which you might remember, we've had a few times, Ditanya, Rabbi Nachman omer, if I owe someone 100, the chavero bechavero, so I owe you 100, and you owe someone else 100. The person who you owe money can just go straight to me. So basically that means that if I owed the animal, right, I owed half of it to the court, and you owed half of it to the court, but the animal's in my possession right now, the court can demand it straight from me, and I have no legal necessity to bring it back to you. And therefore, from me to the court is direct. It doesn't have to go through you at all. And that's why you have no claim against me, because the court immediately can demand it from you, and you can't make any claims. Oh, it had been by me, I could avoid, because there was no reason for it to ever go to you. And he learns it from this pasuk, v'natan la'asher hasham. Okay, and that's the halach of Rabbi Natan. It's called the shibud of Rabbi Natan, which basically means if I have something of yours and you owe someone money, right, and I owe you something and you owe to someone else, that someone else can come and get directly from me. And here the court can get the shore directly from me, even though theoretically it was your shore. So the half payment that you owe is actually can go straight from me to them, which means that you have no claim of, had you returned it to me, I could have done something, because I really have no legal responsibility to return it to you. So this was all the first halacha of this braita, again, which said, if I borrow it thinking it was a tam, it turned out it was a muad, we split the payment, and I don't have any claims to you, and you don't have any claims to me. Okay, again, the structure was, we gave 4 possible claims I could have had. Some we answered by saying it's not an issue. Some we had to kind of say it was an ukimta, that either I knew it was an agchan, and the court already took it from me. And then we said, if you're going to say that the court seized it from me already, then that raises questions on the other end. So these were difficulties raised to that fourth answer, or the answer to the fourth suggestion, which was it was an ukimta where they already seized it. If that's the case, then you can have a claim. Why do you let them seize it? I could have avoided, I could have this, to which we responded, no, you really couldn't have said that. Okay, now we're going to go to the second part of that braita. Okay, if it really was a shor time when I got it, while it was in my possession, it gored 3 times. When I return it to you, it goes back to being a shor time. Well, right, so that's hu'ad bebeit shoel. That means it was forewarned the 3 times when it was in my possession. I returned it to you. Obviously, I'm exempt because it's no longer in my domain, and the owners pay half damages. Now it goes back to being a shor time. This contradicts the first part, because seifa reshut mishaneh, this presumes that as soon as we return it to a different owner, it starts from scratch, because changing domains starts everything all over again. But the Reisha, Reshut Eina Mishaneh. But the Reisha said it doesn't change because it went from you to me. You told me it was tam. I thought it was tam. Turns out it was muad. We have to pay as if it's muad. No, it's true. I only have to pay half, but you pay half. In other words, damages caused, we pay full damages. We just split it, but it's full damages. It stayed as a muad, even though when it was in your domain, it was a tam. So how could that be? It sounds like the first line of the braita holds the reshut eina mishaneh, and the second one holds reshut is mishaneh. So we're going to have three answers to this. Rabbi Yochanan Tavra Misha Shanazo Lo Shanazo split this source in half. One is reshut eina mishnah, and the other is reshut mishanah. In other words, we have two different opinions going on here. The first line is according to one opinion, the second line is according to another. We never really like to go by this if we can avoid it. So Rabbah is going to bring a different answer. Well, if the first part is saying by moving domains, it doesn't change anything, then it's also, we're going to explain the seifa that way. Now, if that's the case, then how does it revert back to being a shor tam? Well, this would be an exception to the rule. You, as the owner of the shor, can say to me as the borrower, if the shor gored 3 times by you, Michelle, well, that's not my problem. In other words, if the shor didn't connect with you very well and you didn't do a very good job watching it and you caused my shor to become crazy, that has no bearing on me when it comes back to me. It comes back to me, it's my shor. What you did with it is your problem. That you were totally irresponsible and my shor got crazy under you. But that's not my fault. Because you're the owner, basically. So you say to me, that's not my fault. Rav Papa Amar, mi de sefer rishon, he's going to go the opposite way. Mi de sefer rishut mishaneh, reisha nami rishut mishaneh. Okay, since the seifa holds that by me giving it back to you, it reverts back to the beginning, we're going to assume anytime it changes reshut, it's going to revert. What's the issue? How are you going to explain the reisha? Why, when I got it as thinking it was a tam, but it was really a muad, why does it retain its status as a muad? So he's going to have to explain that that's an exception to the rule. Everywhere it goes, when I borrow, I'm not taking ownership over it. It's yours. So it retains its status as if it's still yours. I'm just borrowing it. So in a borrowing case, it's different. It's not like you sold it to me. That hadn't really changed domains. But this is actually, it has your name as the owner. It's just borrowed by me. So therefore, it's going to retain its status. Whereas when it goes from me to you and it became muad by me, I wasn't even the owner. Of course, it's going to go back to, like anyone would change ownership. But when it goes from you to me, it doesn't actually change ownership. Now we're going to go to the last section of the Mishnah. Shor ha'itz dadin eino chayav mitaf. You have a bullfight shor, they're not liable to be killed, even if they kill a person, because they were forced to do it. It says in the pasuk ki gach and not ki gichuhu, that people forced him to, right? I always think of the book Ferdinand, right? When they wanted to take him for the bullfight, right? And he was this nice, calm shor. He didn't want to do it, right? And they force him to go fight. Well, that's not his responsibility, nor his owners, really. So we buy it. Now they ask a question. Can you use this on the altar? Because a shor aniskal that killed somebody, you cannot use on the altar. Okay, you can't bring it as a korban. Okay, anyway, the shor has to be stoned, but the point is that you can't use it even if, let's say, it's not stoned yet. But what if it's in this situation where it's stoned because it was forced to, killed someone because it was forced to kill someone and not that it did of its own volition? Is that enough to say, look, it killed someone in the end, so we're not going to allow this on the altar? Or do we say, no, it wasn't the shor's fault at all, so yeah, there's nothing wrong with the shor. So in fact, we have a machlok at Rav and Shmuel. Rav amal kasher, Shmuel amal pasul. Rav says, sure, you could bring it on the altar. Shmuel says, no, you can't. Why? Rav amal kasher, anusu, it wasn't his fault. He was forced to do it. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong if you're forced to kill somebody. Shmuel amar pasul, harena ababo avera. It doesn't matter what the shor's intent was. In the end, a sin was committed with it. Okay, a person was killed. So it doesn't really matter. Meiti. Now they're going to bring a question on Shmuel. This is a pasuk about all the psukim about the korbanot in the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, if from an animal, if from the tzon, if from the bakar, different types of cattle. Mina bema. So why does it say each one separately? So each one is going to exclude a different type that can't be brought as a sacrifice. If it's from an animal, lohotzia tarovea betanirba. That means any animal who engaged in bestiality, either willing or unwilling, can't be used as a sacrifice, right? Either they were raped, forced into it, or if they initiated. Mina bakar lotzia tanevad. This excludes one that was worshipped for avodah zarah, for idols. Mina tzon lotzia tamuktzeh. If it was designated as a sacrifice for avodah zarah, even if it wasn't used, can't be used as a sacrifice. Uminatzon lohotzia tanogeach. Minatzon comes to exclude one who gored. So now, I'm a Rabbi Shimon. Im ne'amar rovea, lama ne'amar nogeach. Im ne'amar nogeach, lama ne'amar rovea. Rovea and nogeach are both ones that they did sins, right? They did things they killed a person, they engaged in bestiality with a person. Those are both terrible things. And it really seems like you should be able to learn one from the other. Well, each one has something that the other doesn't have, and that's why it needs to be listed separately. What is that? Rovea asabo ones keratzon. In rovea, it doesn't matter whether it did it intentionally or was forced into it. But nogeach lo asabo ones keratzon. That's going to be our important part. It's not the same if it was forced into it or it did it of its own initiative. It's not the same law. We'll come back to this in a minute. Nogeach meshalem kofer, rovea eno meshalem to kofer. Nogeach pays kofer ransom payment, or rovea doesn't pay a kofer payment. An animal engaged in bestiality doesn't pay kofer. What kofer has to do with that? That'll be tomorrow. Because they each have different criteria, the braita ends with, that's why they each needed to be said. Now, katani miyad, let's go back to this line. Rovea asabo ones keratzon. Nogeach lo asabo ones keratzon. Lamai hilchet halav lekorban. And when it says ones and ratzon are not the same, doesn't it mean that they're not the same when it comes to, can you use them for a sacrifice? Because that was the topic of the braita, to which they say no. Lekatla. No, what it meant is their essence is different, not specifically as it relates to korban, but in terms of this shor killed someone, does the shor get stoned or not? Well, that depends whether it's ones or ratzon, but it doesn't say sacrifice, okay, for the korban. So in other words, they brought it to Shmuel to say, look, Shmuel, you said it can't be used as a sacrifice. Here it says there's a distinction, right? Even if it was forced, it's the same. But he said, no, if it was forced, it's the same as regarding death, not as regarding sacrifices. And furthermore, they're going to prove this, and with this will end. Hachinami mistabra di yomar lekorban nogeach lo asaba ones keratzon lav ones didei ktiv lav ratzon didei ktiv alalav lekab. If you're going to say the topic of nogeach, the Torah distinguished between ones and ratzon, well, where did the Torah talk about that? In the Kinagach pasuk, when it talked about the animal's going to be killed. It didn't, right? And lo sheyigichuhu, and not that they forced him. It never talks anywhere about sacrifices, about an ox that gored or anything. So therefore, it must be that they're talking about the death, killing the animal, and not the sacrifices. Obviously, then, it comes to say, can't be used as sacrifice, but you could say, can't be used as sacrifice, could include even one that was forced into it. So it doesn't necessarily contradict Shmuel. It doesn't prove it, but it doesn't necessarily contradict. Okay, quick review of our very long daf with lots of different topics. So we started with the Rava and Abaye and really questioned Rava and why did he come up with a convoluted answer to explain Rabbi Yaakov, and then we figured that out, what he was trying to teach us. Then we said about the apitropos doesn't pay kofer because kofer is kapara and you don't need that for children or a cheresh or a shoteh. Then we moved to those questions about the nature of a kofer of two partners and what's exactly this kofer payment that Rav Nachman didn't really have answers to. Then we got into this borrowing a shor and thinking it was one and it turned out it was another, or returning the shor when it was a muad, it reverts back to being a tam. We have a whole slew of questions in the first part. Why couldn't he have claimed this and gotten out of the half payment, which we explained why not. Then we went to the contradiction between the first part and the second part. This sounds like switching domains does knock it down a level or not. How we resolve that, 3 ways of resolving. And then we went to the shor tzadin and about whether Rav and Shmuel have a debate about whether it can be used as a sacrifice or not. And with that, we brought a question on Shmuel and resolved it. Tomorrow, we're going to figure out that line in the braita that didn't make so much sense. What are we talking about? The rovea doesn't pay kofer. What ransom would there be for bestiality? And we'll deal with that tomorrow. Wishing everybody a good day, happy Hanukkah, and hoping for better news today.